We are certain that a reign of terror against the black population of that part of Phillips County took place. We are certain that machine gun crews went out looking for people to gun down.
In the predominantly black town of Elaine, Arkansas, a dark and sinister event unfolded that would shake the community to its core forever. That September unholy night, filled with unearthly terror and bloodshed, continues to resound in the annals of history. It was the day where a group of white mobs had descended on the predominantly black town, leaving a trail of irrevocable damage in their wake. This would turn out to be one of the darkest chapters in America's history, one of the deadliest acts of racial violence in the early 20th century, known as the Elaine mass killing or the Elaine race riot. In addition, sharecroppers worked the land for a small share of the crop and were forced to sell their cotton to the landowners who paid less than market prices. Many were kept in debt to their landlords.
The man would take your cotton, and then the man at the store you had credit, he run the books up on you, so you didn't have nothing. You work a whole year and hand pick 40 bales of cotton and come out with nothing.
Which rippled across the entire United States like some raging force of darkness, which it obviously was. The African American community, fueled by the promise of equality and justice, had begun to organize and demand better working conditions and fair wages from white plantation owners. On that night of September 30, 1919, approximately 100 African Americans, mostly sharecroppers on the plantations of white landowners, attended a meeting of the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America at a church in Hoop Spur, Phillips County. In previous months, racial conflict had occurred in numerous cities in America, including Washington, D.C., Chicago, Illinois, Knoxville, Tennessee, and Indianapolis, Indiana. And seeing it as a threat to their power, they had responded with brute force, sparking a wave of violence that would last for days. At 11 p.m., a band of white men would shoot into the church. Black guards returned the fire, resulting in the killing of W.A. Adkins, a white security agent of the Missouri Pacific Railroad, and the wounding of Charles Pratt, Phillips County's white deputy sheriff. News of the shooting quickly reached the county seat of Helena. Soon, word would spread that blacks were attacking whites in Elaine. By early morning on October 1, the sheriff sent white veterans from the American Legion Post to suppress what he deemed as an insurrection. Calls went out to the governor for federal troops. Telephone lines to Elaine were cut. Throughout the day, at least 1,000 white vigilantes came from all over the state and from Mississippi to join plantation owners, their managers, sheriffs, deputies, and the veterans to put down what they had called an uprising. By the day's end, countless black women, men, and children had been slaughtered. The following morning, Governor Charles H. Breaux of Arkansas and a World War I veteran, Colonel Isaac Jenks, personally escorted 583 soldiers, including a machine gun battalion, from Camp Pike in Little Rock, the state capital, to Elaine. Colonel Jenks sent all of the white women and children to Helena by train, ordered the immediate disarming of everyone, and authorized the killing of black insurgents who failed to disarm. Then the real mass killing began. For the next 5 days, Colonel Jenks and his troops, assisted by vigilantes, hunted black people over a 100-mile radius. They scorched and burned homes with families inside, slaughtered and tortured others. The troops were aided by 7 machine guns. At least 200 African Americans were killed, although the estimates run much higher, but there was never a full accounting. Many hid in the swamps and thickets. Others were said to have been gunned down in fields as they worked, and throngs of others surrendered themselves to the authorities for arrest. Amidst the violence, only 5 whites died, but for those deaths, someone would have to be held accountable. Or blacks in mourning, who had lost their loved ones, watching them shot before their eyes. Some were burned, others raped and killed. These were the very ones who were called insurrectionists, arrested and thrown in jail. On October 31, a grand jury indicted 122 black men and women for offenses ranging from murder to night riding. The jury charged 12 black men with the capital murders of 3 white men and sentenced them to death, even though 2 of the deaths had occurred from white people accidentally shooting each other in the frenzy. The 12 men sentenced to death were Frank Moore, Frank Hicks, Ed Hicks, Joe Knox, Paul Hall, Ed Coleman, Alfred Banks, Ed Ware, William Wardlaw, Albert Giles, Joe Fox, and John Martin. The confessions of the black men had been secured through torture. Thus, black people were blamed, sentenced, and jailed for their own mass killing. The terrorism of cutting off the ears or toes of dead Negroes for souvenirs and dragging their bodies through the streets of Elaine. They then moved to another home where they murdered yet another Union member, Frances Hall. In a final act of disrespect, they tied her dress over her head and left her body on the side of the road for several days. 79-year-old Ed Coleman had remained at home with his wife when people fleeing Hoop Spur came to his house and warned them to leave. As they ran from the posse, the Coleman saw his neighbor, Jim Miller, and his family being burned alive in their house. After hiding for 2 days in the woods, the Colemans returned home to find dead bodies of women and children scattered about their community.
I want to give all the praises and the honor to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem Racha HaKodash, and double honors to the elder apostles and the elder bishops of Great Millstone. Honors as well to you brethren, you fellow believers of this truth, and shalom to the elect. So anyway, I saw this video from Black Culture TV or something, right? He has some interesting things that they've dealing with our history, and this is exactly why I don't subscribe to Black History Month, because anything before the 1600s, there's no history. All they let us know is about Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, and for other little research, you can go dive deep and try to figure out on your own. But for whatever reason, they left this out, right? You have a people over in the other lands, or claiming to be us, who claim that we should never forget, right? That don't never forget. There's a horrible thing happened to us. But these people who, set themselves separate from us, tried to make it seem like that they didn't have a hand in that, and the controlling of that, through funding. But these other people plan to be of God's chosen, God's people, right? They'll hold on to every little bit of so-called history they got, but we've endured nothing but multiple massacres. And I'm going to read in the scriptures. This is how we know we're the Israelites, man. No wonder they didn't want to tell us all this stuff. And what do they have so much fear with us, So now we understand that they know who we are. So they have a lot of fear. Right? Simeon Toko, look him up. Deuteronomy 28:15, but it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and do all his commandments, right, and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. So the Lord is going to, he's showing you in here, I'm just going to read a couple of them. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out. Right? We also had the ones they did finally mention with the Tulsa, Oklahoma, which them businesses that we so-called owned was still on white property. They made sure they kept it their property. And it was supposedly a white woman, a white girl, so-called white girl, that they used to set up the situation, just like in Rosewood, just like with Emmett Till. This is what they do, the cowards that they are, right? They'll find anything. They'll use their own little girls to set off a murdering spree. You know what I'm saying? And so that land that sat on, they never really owned that. So what did they do? They came and rushed in and burnt that down too, with the help of, who, the Gov, right? Goes on to say, I'm just going through this. I don't know what I'm going to speak on, just in the spirit. I don't have no planned scriptures. Now in the Deuteronomy 28, it goes in different parts of time, right? It goes in different sections of time. You have Babylon, you have the 70 AD, you have now, and you have some things that occurring over and over, right? So I'm going to get, the Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them, right? and shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. Now, I read the story of Columbus with I think the Indian company or whatever. They said when he got off the ship, it was just one of him and 7 of them ran. They fled. This was actually in the book that I was reading, right? Because I forgot where they was, Honduras, or they was somewhere in South America, right? So anyway, let me go on down here. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given to another people, and thy eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. Right. So again, we see this is during the slave trade as well. Now they might say this happened before, and if it did, well, it happens through generations. Right. Let's go to Job. As I go on, I'll think of some scriptures as I go on. Job 34, and we'll hit about 29. When he giveth quietness, who then can make trouble? And when he hideth his face, who then can behold him? Whether it be done against a nation or a man only. So we see that. Let's go on down. Let me see here. I mean, if this is not us, I don't know who is. The fruit of thy land and all thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up. Isn't this what happened during slavery? Right? So now a little history on the emancipation, which means transfer of a rulership from the least. It was all banker orchestrated. They just used us to break us and then say they want their slaves back in a nutshell. Right? But what they did is they fought against, because they wanted to keep their slaves, right? But what happened is, long story short, slaves got so-called freed, but then the governors and politicians, they set up something called vagrancy laws. So when they was out and they were roaming about, they would lock them up for loitering. That's where you get your loitering from, when somebody's standing around. So they would lock them up and put them in jail, and then have them work for cheap labor. They would get a bail, but nobody could bail them out. They were broke, so they were like homeless people that was used for cheap labor. If they were like elderly, they would kind of leave them alone, but they targeted people that could make them money. And even to the day, it's no different. Even to the day, if an older homeless man get pulled in the system and he's worthless, they'll cut him loose and send him back on the street. But a younger man, they'll keep him in there to get that free, cheap labor. So we see now, when you look at the psychiatry of it and what happened to us as a people, this is why you see the way we are today, right? When they passed the Fair Housing Act, was designed to help women and children. And they said families, right? Women, children, and families, right? But for whatever reason, if a man was there, he wouldn't get help. Isn't the man part of the family too? Right? Isn't he the father of the family? Right? So they wouldn't help him. So then he had to leave and let them be raised, and then they gave him benefits, right? So then they became dependent on the system. Then, not to mention giving them health care and televisions, right? And now, as you see today, it all manifested to TikTok and Facebook, some YouTube, and then you see the rap music, some R&B music, and you see the total destruction of our people. So they went from, let me get another scripture real quick. I believe it's the book of Jeremiah. I don't want to talk too much on that. I want to get some scriptures on this. Let's go to the book of Jeremiah 8 and verse, I believe it's 11. For they have healed the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly, saying peace, peace, when there is no peace. Were they ashamed when they had committed abomination? No, they were not at all ashamed, neither could they blush. Therefore shall they fall among them that fall. In the time of their visitation, they shall be cast down, saith the Lord. Right? So, let's go to Jeremiah 30:16. Right? Therefore, all they that devour thee shall be devoured, and all thine adversaries, right? Every one of them shall go into captivity. And they that spoil thee shall be spoiled, and they that prey upon thee will I give for a prey. So you got to understand, it wasn't just the KKK. Like everybody says, it was the Klans, who were Christians, by the way. You know, a lot of these people, a lot of these white men that's doing this was all Christian. They claim to be Christians, which we know a Christian is actually a Jew, by the way, because that's what so-called Christ was, a Jew. And this makes sense why they burnt crosses in our backyards, right? Because the one you call Christ was also hung on a so-called cross, or they say cross, the sacrifice to Tammuz, right? So why did Negroes get crosses hanging in their backyard? This links you to know who the hell we are, right? I'm going to read a little bit on this Elaine thing, but let me go a little bit further. I mean, you can read this whole chapter and think of different dispensations of time and history, and it still leads up to us. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger and thirst, and in nakedness, and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck, right, until he have destroyed thee, right? What was that? Make that make sense. But you got a people saying, we must not forget our heritage. We must not forget our history. And they're putting it all up over all these networks and television, but they'll never talk about this. Not just this. They had different massacres where they took children and locked them in the school, chained up the school and set it on fire. And this is the sick part. They use the situation of all the things they do for the average so-called black person, Hispanic person, and some white people, whoever, right? They'll use all this hatred that was done on us, and then when we retaliate and say, according to the Bible, this has got to come to you, then they say, look, y'all teach hate. That's what they're saying. And we've done nothing that these people have done. So somehow, whatever's happened with them and all the things that they've done, they link it back and say, we don't want no more. See, the average mind, the average person with a spiritual mind would understand that this was done to us. It must be done back to them in the time of the Lord, of course. But yet this man, you could go murder somebody, right, at the age of 15 and get away for 50 years, right? And then next thing you know, you're in your mid-60s and they'll bring you to justice on that charge. There's no repenting or anything. But for whatever reason, they're using Christ, because Christ was dealing with forgiveness, but it was forgiveness of sins of the Israelites. But as a nation of people, we were destroyed by this other nation, the Edomites. So how can the hell can they be forgiven? The remission of sins and a reconciliation was to the Israelites. You can't reconcile to something that you never was a part of. Anyway, let's go here. The Elaine Massacre occurred September 30th, 1919, in the vicinity of Elaine, rural Phillip County, Arkansas, right? Where African Americans were organized against pillage and abuses in tenant farming. As many as several hundred African Americans and 5 white men were killed, with some by accident, and it was some to retaliating. So in other words, you can get your ass kicked and you fight back. Are you listening, you black conscience gurus? Right? Yeah, you go ahead and start fighting back and see, won't that spirit raise up on you? All we got is the Lord, right? And that's who's going to fight for us. That's why he said, wait upon me. Right? Estimate deaths made by the immediate aftermath of Elaine Massacre eyewitness range from 50 to more than 100. Yeah, it was way more than that. Shortly after the incident stated 25 Negroes killed, though some places Negro fatalities as high as 100. More estimates of the 21st century of the number of black people killed during the violence are higher than estimates provided by eyewitnesses and have ranged into the hundreds. Right? The white mobs, who were predominantly Christians, by the way, were aided by federal troops. Right? They were aided. So this is the federal troops that went in there and did this. So all they did is sparked up some insurrection or some crazy madness, as they say, created a coup, right? And then went on and reported the story back to the government, and they looked at it like, these are crazy Negroes. Let's go on up in there. And they rained havoc on us, man. Right? So anyway, the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from afar, from one end of the earth even into the other, as swift as the eagle flieth. A nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. So when you go around talking about, when they talk about Barbary, that you was talking about, is talking about the slave, a form of a slave trade. So when you go around talking about all nations went into slavery, the Barbary slave trade, all nations, this is talking about one nation, right? And another nation. It says a nation that thou shalt not understand. This is your biblical history. This is us in the Bible. Right? Salakia, last verse. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there thou shalt be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. In the original translation is redeem you. But somehow they said, you shall sell yourselves. It's never said that in that text. That's another video. Joel 3. I will also, 3 and 2, I will also gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Yahweh's judgment, Jehoshaphat, and will plead with them there for my people and my heritage Israel, whom they scattered among the nations and parted my land. So wait a minute. If those people are claiming to be the people of God, why they all look like that? I thought they were scattered amongst all the nations. They scattered themselves. Who scattered them? Yeah, all right. And they have cast lots for my people, right? And given a boy for an harlot, and sold a girl for wine that they might drink. So we can clearly see, who else is this? Yea, and it says, yea, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coasts of Palestine? Will you recompense me render me a recompense? Remember, everything written aforetime is for our learning. So you might see this and think it's just talking about one particular nation, but this is all the nations that had their hand in our captivity, right? And if you recompense me swiftly and speedily, will I recompense upon your own head? Behold, ye have taken my silver and my gold and carried them away to your goodly pleasant things, your temples, my goodly pleasant things. The children of Judah and also the children of Jerusalem have you sold to the Grecians, that ye might be removed far from your border, from their border. Right? Behold, I will raise them out in the place whither you have sold them. Where did you sell them? Right here. Right? And I will return your recompense upon your own head. This is Revelation 18. Double unto her, right? According to her works. It says, and I will sell your sons and your daughters, right, into the hands of the children of Judah, and they shall sell them to the Sabians and the people far off. Now, when we go to Acts 2, it talks about the children of Israel who scattered to one place and another people far off. For the Lord has spoken it. So you're going to be sold right back, and all these things you've done to us going to come back to you, but it's going to be in righteousness, right? You're going to get that double according to the works. You've been a bad boy, Esau, Edom, on this earth, and your time of judgment is nigh. That's all I have on that. Shalom.